all these decisions you make every day, the number one decision you make, the number one decision we all make every single day is to not decide. We do it all the time. So your job as a business owner and as a marketer is to get through this psychological filter. So you will be recognized, you will be noticed. And the way you do that is through those 4 factors.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Your Customer, Your Success. My guest today is Will Leach. Will is the founder of Mindstate Group, where he helps companies understand the subconscious drivers behind why their customers actually choose. Before founding Mindstate roughly 12 years ago, Will led strategic insights at PepsiCo and spent nearly 2 decades inside behavioral research, with earlier work in biotech and energy. He is the best-selling author of Marketing to Mindstates, which has become a practical playbook for leaders, brand teams, and researchers who want to build real psychological empathy with their customers. He teaches behavioral design at SMU's Cox School of Business and at the Texas A&M Human Behavior Lab, and his work has shaped strategy for some of the most well-known brands in the country. If that's not enough, he's also a podcast host. Are you you're crazy? You're a podcast host? You do that too? He's
I
a
can't
host.
get enough.
He's the head of the host of the Mindstate Marketing Hour podcast. Will, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Gary. I appreciate your time. It's going to be a good conversation today.
It is, and thank you for being here. And I do have to say, Will is from the great state of Texas, and that is the law that he's on this episode because it's been 5 episodes without somebody from Texas. So we are back to Texas. I think you're guest 11 or 12. I lost count. So welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So this is a really interesting topic, and I had to prepare a whole bunch for this one because you've got a whole lot of interesting stuff going on. I looked at some of your work, your posts, your other interviews. Let's start by getting the audience familiar with what you do and how you think about things. So you've spent your career studying the gap between what customers tell us and what's actually driving them, which is sometimes different. For a leader who thinks they already know their customers well, what does it mean to build that psychological empathy with that customer, and why is it different from anything that we get out of kind of normal thinking or a survey or an NPS score or anything like that?
Yeah, I think we got to start off with all behaviors are emotionally based. We have to understand that you will not take action unless there's some sort of an emotion behind it. And I think we say those words kind of very flippantly sometimes, like, well, of course, we have to be more emotional. But what I want you to understand, your audience to understand, is that there have been studies that show when people lose total empathy and the ability to create emotion from a head trauma perspective, that they can't make decisions. So the areas of the brain that control emotion and regulation, if that's damaged, you will find these people in rare instances weren't able to make decisions. So emotions matter a lot more than just the superficial. We need to be more emotional to make our marketing more engaging. Why that's so important for you is that if you understand what the emotional kind of components are to your decisions that you make or your customers' decisions, you can actually influence those through what we call behavioral design. We're going to talk a lot more about that, I'm sure. But it's really important to understand that your customers' emotions drive their behaviors, and their behaviors ultimately drive your bottom line.
Wow. Interesting. Because now I'm sure a lot of people think this about themselves, but I think I'm very logical in my decisions, almost to a
Sure.
fault. This is why I find this interesting. And my wife even says that to me. Most people don't think like you. Probably overthink things. So I get it. And this is why it's so fascinating to me, because I feel like I don't necessarily do that, but maybe I'm the outlier. Maybe you're going to tell me I'm wrong. And I probably do have emotion somewhere. And that emotion is not what I think it is. But you talk about the subconscious behavioral factors as the real drivers, which is probably what's going on with me, because I'm very cautious when I make a big decision. Walk us through what those factors are and why most companies still are designing things as if customers make rational, conscious choices like Gary thinks he makes.
Yep. So there are 4 factors that you need to understand, and we talk about these in the book Marketing to Mindstates. The first thing you must understand are what your customers' goals are. Now, that's something called goal theory. And why these goals are important is that all behaviors, every single action you take is towards a goal, whether you know it or not. And most of the time, we don't know those goals. They're subconscious, right?
Mm.
So what you have to do is your mind is constantly looking for areas to reach a goal. So you have to understand people's goals. I mean, there's different levels of goals. There's these functional goals, emotional goals we just talked about a little bit, and then aspirational goals. I want to really talk about aspirational goals because aspirational goals are those things that you don't realize are really influencing your customers' behaviors. They're aspirational goals, who they want to become using your product, using your service. So the first function or the first factor in the model are goals. Now, all because you have goals doesn't mean that people are going to do anything differently. Like you and I, we have goals every January 1st. We probably sit down, at least I do. I go to Starbucks, I write down my New Year's resolutions, and I realize that by mid February, a bunch of those things I have not taken action on. That is not because my goals are bad. It's because I lack motivation to keep going after the goal once kind of friction gets in play. That's why the second part of the model is called motivations, motivational psychology. Think of motivations are those fuels. It's like the fuel for an engine. So if you desire, if you are motivated by achievement, then you are going to go find goals that help you become more successful. If you desire belonging and feeling like you're accepted with a group, your goals in that specific occasion is going to be around finding affiliation and finding friends. So these 9 motivations. Just think about motivations as what fuels people to actually take action. Third part is something called regulatory fit. I call it approach. And this is what you just talked about, Gary. We approach all of our actions in one of 2 ways. We're either optimistic, and then therefore we seek more good things in life, or we seek more pleasure, more gains, or we're cautious. And that's we approach our problems by seeking to eliminate risk, to eliminate barriers. Same goals, same motivations, but you and I may approach those very differently. You may look for things like, well, this brand is going to help me not make a mistake because you said you're cautious in some areas of your
Mm.
life. I'm actually pretty cautious in general. It's part of my personality. But however, in business, I'm optimistic. I'm much more aggressive in business. I take bigger chances. So I'm more optimistic in certain areas of my life. So you have to know that because the way you talk to your customers would differ. If I'm going to get Gary to buy my car and say, "Hey, you're not going to make a mistake here, Gary. This car is going to give you fewer accidents, fewer headaches." Negative. I'm trying to eliminate negative. Or you do the same car to me. "Hey, Will, you're going to go faster in this car. This is going to get you the latest technologies." See what I mean? Same
Mhm.
car, I can position it slightly differently. And then the last part of that model are these things called biases. We call them triggers in the book. Basically, we make 35,000 decisions every single day. That's what the researcher tells us.
Mm.
35,000. The vast majority of those decisions have what's called a bias input into place. There are these things that help us make fast, easy decisions. So, for instance, one of them could be scarcity effect. And we tend to assign greater value to things that we believe are scarce in nature. That's why we all wanted the cheerleader, Captain the cheerleader, right? She's
Mhm.
scarce, right? So we value those things. Another one is social proof. We value things that we believe lots of other people are doing. We assign more value. Why? Because if I know if something's scarce and I believe that lots of other people are buying this product, it makes my decision easier. I can do less cost benefit analysis and I can just absolutely go, okay, hey, heck, they don't have very many offers here and a lot of people are buying them. I think that's probably a good way or a good decision for me. You use these 4 factors every single day in different capacities, right? And so this is why you want to understand all 4 of these factors and develop marketing and experiences and sales to tap into those 4 factors. And when you do that, you can take one of those 35,000 decisions that are made, and the vast majority of them are at the non-conscious level, and you can influence those. And that's why this type of marketing, this type of science is really helpful in growing businesses.
Wow. That is a lot to digest. And I'm going to just open up the next question by saying, obviously, I think a lot of folks miss that. So, how are you taking that all in and applying that, right? Because you're working at big brands, and we mentioned Pepsi. That is a lot to think about for a can of Pepsi.
It is
Right now,
definitely.
I just all right. I'm kind of a Coke guy. I don't I used to drink Pepsi when I was a kid because that's what mom put in the fridge. But that I don't think that much about my soda choice. But apparently, there's a lot more going on in here than meets the eye.
I like what you said. You don't think very much about your soda choices. You're absolutely correct. You don't think about your soda choices, but you have feelings that are influencing your soda choices, and they're all at the non conscious level. So, First thing I would tell your audience, because you don't, I love the premise of the book is it's a practical guide to applying behavioral design to research and marketing. I want it to be practical. You don't have to get a PhD in behavioral psychology to do this work. Here's all you have to do. The number one thing I would tell anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about their customer is say, first, ask this simple question: what do you want as it relates to blank? My category, my brand, my restaurant. Just ask people, what are the five most important things that you think are important to you in soda? Let's just use soda. What are the five
Mm,
most important things? And they're going to tell things like, well, it's got to taste good, it's got to be a good value, it's got to be healthy. Whatever those things are, fine, no problem. We can do that any day of the week, and we've been doing that in research for 60 years. Then what you want to do is say, okay, great, thank you. Collectively, why are those five things important to you? Collectively, this is where you're going to ladder somebody's thinking, if you will, to emotions. They're going to say, well, if I got those five things from my soda, then I wouldn't feel like I made a bad choice. And when I could have gone with my normal brand, I went with this brand. Okay, so now they have a feeling. We just tapped into a feeling, whether you know it or not. They're trying to avoid a bad choice. So there's maybe the regret could come in there, some fear, whatever. I know we're taking this to a crazy level, but frankly,
no,
it's possible.
mhm.
Then ask him again. Okay, so if you didn't feel like, or if you were to never make a regret and you always made the right soda choice, how would that make you feel? So you just say again, why? Like, why? You ladder up. How would that make you feel? Then they may say something, well, I'm the type of person that makes good choices in life. That's what's called the aspirational goal.
Mhm.
When your brand talks to people's aspirations, you now cut through so much clutter because remember, your brain is constantly looking to reach its aspirational goal. And I know it sounds silly, but even soda makes us feel something like we are the type of person that some brands like PepsiCo for a long time was trying to be cool. They were trying to be the cool soda. Coca Cola was all American. So what did they do back in the 80s and 90s and even today? They find cool, cool, cool.
Michael
And
Jackson.
Michael Jackson, that's exactly why they did. And you know what share they took because of that? By using Michael Jackson and Pepsi, they gained a ton of share on Coca Cola, right? So they tapped into people's desire to feel cool, and so now they position their brand to that aspirational goal. So every time they want to feel cool, and they may not be anywhere near a cooler, anywhere near soda. My job for my brands is for that brand to come to mind, even if it's not consciously in mind. I create an association between the subconscious mind and the idea of Pepsi being cool. So when
Mhm.
that person's looking at fashion and they're in the Express, let's go back in the day, or they're putting on
Express.
their yeah in the 80s, right? Now all of a sudden that brand certainly is there, but I'm hoping that Pepsi is also associated with that.
Mhm.
That's what you want to do.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think one of the things with Coca-Cola to me, and I've said this before in a few contexts, is um, this might be at the subconscious level, is the consistency, and people don't think about that. You know what's coming. You know what you're going to get. I mean, and I say this all the time. Have you ever gotten a bad Coke? No, because it's the
Very rare.
exact same every single time without question. So when you crack that lid, you know exactly what's coming, especially if you're thirsty, or you got a nice new bottle of rum you want to make a rum and
Right.
coke with. But you know what I'm saying? It's so I
Yep.
think it's that consistency that you always know what to expect in
Yep.
there. Yeah.
Yep. And I'll tell you on the consistency, why that's important is our habits. So you make 35,000 decisions every single day. And I know you guys are probably thinking, well, how do you get through life? I'm going to tell you how you get through life. You don't do cost benefit analysis every morning. Okay, you hear the alarm and okay, do I open my eyes? Do I not open my eyes? Do I use my right hand to turn off the alarm? Do I not use my right hand to turn off the alarm? You're not doing cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
You're using habits. How are habits formed? Consistency, consistency. So we get brands all the time saying, how do we become a brand that's habitual? And it's the number one thing you should try to do. I mean, it's so important because the vast majority of decisions are made habitually. You're not thinking about your Coca Cola. You just walk over to the cooler and you grab the soda that has consistently paid off, helping you reach your aspirational goals. That's why consistency matters to build a habit around your brand.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. Because you don't think of it, but you just know that that's all right. You know it's Coke, right? Now, if there's something new on the shelf and it's at Stop and Shop, it's on sale. You're sitting there and you're probably going, "What is this and why is it on sale?" Whatever the Polar brands or whatever it is, there. I'm sure they're fine. Nothing against Polar brands, but you don't know if you're going to like it. You know, the other thing is I don't know if my 9-year old's going to like it. I highly doubt my 14-year old's going to like it because he's the picky one. but you know what you're getting in there, and that kind of pulls it through in the end. That's pretty damn interesting.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Like you said,
So
and remember, you just talked about your 14-year-old. He has aspirations just like you do. And so him holding a generic soda at a party has real implications to the coolness he
the
feels at
coolness,
school.
oh, he's got, yeah,
It's
he's
true. That's why brands exist, right, guys? We can all make sugar water, right? That's not a problem. But those brands are what causes them. So that if something does come up and he does think, he makes that choice. Remember, he built those associations between Pepsi and cool, more likely to buy Pepsi because that says something about him. That's why we have to understand these aspirational goals and motivations, all those things from the mind state.
the so and he's getting there, the 14-year-old. So
Mine is too.
let's talk more about the mind state. So that you've introduced that in your book. Um, let's kind of take it a step further. Why? w- Tell us why maybe a marketing executive might start to use this and think why two customers who look the same on paper can respond differently, right? Because
Yeah.
I just now my two sons are very different. One will just kind of try anything, and the other one is very cautious. He will not experiment. But that's not what we're talking about here. You're saying two people who are cautious could respond differently versus two people who are a little bit more brave with their choices.
Yeah, no, certainly. So just think about all these behaviors are a function of these four factors: goals, motivations, regulatory approach, whether I'm optimistic or cautious, and these biases, these triggers. So the reason why you can have two people that look identical on a spreadsheet and you're like they have the same age, they have the same revenue, they have the same background, the same education levels, etc., but we are more, you know uh we are more than just our experiences in those factors. We have experiences that cut across our life, like how we're raised, um times when a product has disappointed us. What are our desires? Like you two boys have different aspirations in life, I'm sure. Like my son has a very different aspiration than his friends, though they are in the same classes and they take the same courses,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah.
So if you realize that throughout our lives, we are having our goals, we're coming up with new goals for ourselves. We have, these maybe emotional things that are happening. We desire different feelings or whatever. That's why it's so important to understand people's goals and their motivations. So, for instance, I'll do home buying. I've done some work in the home buying field.
Oh, geez.
Right. A lot of emotion. It's funny because when I
Oh
first
yeah.
did this work, it was with a company called Woodside, and we've been on stage many times. And they were run by former home builders, and they're like, people make decisions based upon price per square foot. Like, actually, no, 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 no. Homes represent very different things to different people. So
Oh
you
yeah.
and I, we're probably around the same age, right, Gary? Probably have same level of education. We kind of look alike, whatever. So if you thought I built a home based upon square footage, then you are never going to get my home, my me to buy your home, because homes can be seen as it's a place for me to build a sanctuary for my family. Now, during COVID, that was a big deal
Yeah.
because the outside world was very scary. Inside world protection mattered. So I could take a home and I could position it around this is a safe neighborhood and it's a safe home, and you're not going to get screwed. So we're not going to take advantage of you. That's around safety. Other people use a home as a status symbol. It's around esteem,
Yeah.
right? So I got this great neighborhood. I've always wanted to live in this neighborhood. So in that case, if I was going to if I was going to sell a home to this type of person, I would be talking about, homes around here are exclusive. And this is the type of home that that is respected. We're a quality builder that's respected. I can tap into that esteem motivation. Other people build a home to show love and appreciation. Other people buy it because they're successful, right? So
Mhm.
my point is that like these mind states, when you identify these goals, these motivations, how they approach a home, I'm buying a home to not get screwed, cautious. I'm buying this home to get my family into a better neighborhood, optimistic. Two different ways of talking about the home. So that's why you can look at the same person on a spreadsheet, but if you don't know their goals, their motivations, and their approaches, you don't know exactly how to sell your home. So, and remember, I'll go back. Out of all these decisions you make every day, the number one decision you make, the number one decision we all make every single day is to not decide. We do it all the time. We put
Hmm.
off decisions, we ignore things. We look at an email and decide I'm going to just delete it without eating or without reading it. So your job as a business owner and as a marketer is to get through this psychological filter. So you will be recognized, you will be noticed. And the way you do that is through those four factors.
Wow. that is using that lens now, thinking of buying a home is amazingly fascinating because there's so much that goes into it. Um, Not only that, it's the schools, if you're a parent, the neighborhood. Are there other kids in the neighborhood? Is this empty nesters? Are you an empty nester? Do you want to be more in an empty nester kind of neighborhood? And it's such a huge investment, but to me, it means so much because I grew up in the same home. You know what I mean? I didn't move. It was that's a home I grew up in until I moved out and everything, and it stayed. My mother stayed there. Um,
And what's
After
interesting, Gary, is that
Mm.
when you're making those decisions, you're certainly acting on behalf of your kids, right? Of course, like, is it
Yep.
a good school district, whatever, but you're also acting on how you want to be on your best day, your aspirational self. You're the type of father that knows that school is really important. And so the school district that I move into, that says something about you. So even though you think, well, I'm making a rational decision, you probably are more rational when you're making a five, six, $1 million decision, whatever it is,
Yeah.
$150,000 decision for sure.
Well, yeah.
But those decisions are still being influenced on one, how am I helping others? That's the nurturance motivation in that case. And also, how am I perceiving myself? I'm the type of father that takes my kids' education and safety seriously. So that home is a signal to you that you're a good person. That's why you choose this home builder versus another home builder.
Yeah, and actually, this home was built. We did buy it from a builder, but it's also the reason we don't move because we came down and we didn't know about the schools, and actually, it's worked great. And now we're like, well, where the hell are we going to go? Because we don't, to go anywhere else in the same town doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. So, really fascinating stuff to put it in that context. So let's pull it back into the consumer kind of business mindset a little bit. So you've applied this thinking to Fortune 100 companies, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to name names if you can. If you can, great. But
Yep.
what does it look like when a brand finally sees its customer through this lens? What changes in the work and what difference does it make? I'm sure it's dramatic.
Yeah, it is. I'll go back to that builder one because I worked with a company called Woodside Homes, and they are a subsidiary of the largest home manufacturer in the world out of Japan. And the people that are running that business, when you looked at the website, it was very much cost per square foot. They put their website wasn't horrible, but they were noticing that they were not building share in the Southwest, and that's where they really had us focus on. They said, "Well, why are people buying homes? Because we whatever our messaging is, we're not able to compete against builders, and we know we're better at that. We have higher quality builds, but we're losing share to these other builders."
Hmm.
So we did a lot of research for them to really talk to people in a very different way. We use a technique called projective research techniques, but all it really is trying to tap into the non-conscious. There's all sorts of different methodologies to do that. So after this work, we identified that and this was during COVID, right in the middle of COVID. Homes had a very strong what we call security motivation that is attached to them because people were trying to protect their families, and so and that protection was from like the outside world, but also creating a safe sanctuary is this term that we came up with. Like, they're trying to create a sanctuary for the home because I have to send my kids into the world, which is very different than the world that we grew up in. So we did all this work and basically changed three different things. One, their website was totally redone. I wish you guys could see the old website, but the website was so much less functional around. We've been builders for 200 years. Or I forgot what it was. Not 200 years, but we've been out there for a long time. We're the biggest builder. When we start talking about it, is we help you build not houses but homes.
Mm.
And then we show lifestyle images where the whole family's together and the outside is not close. The outside world is out there. So you always see that there was a large gap between where the family was standing and the windows and stuff like that. Why? Because I'm trying to create a psychological association that the outside world is far away when you buy this type of home.
Mm.
Website was dramatically changed. But also the home buying process. When you go into a custom home, it can be kind of intimidating, right? And the salespeople are there for a sale, right? They're trying to get the customer excited. So we actually created brand new scripts so that the salesperson could talk to the customer, say, tell me what's important for you in a home. Recognize that word, that question, right,
Mm.
Gary? What's
Mhm.
important to you when buying a home? Tell me why that's important to you. What they were given were training to understand, why it's important. If they start talking about the school district, let's go back to that
Mhm.
example. That all of a sudden they can start thinking, this person is trying to protect their child, or they're trying to get their child to be more successful. That's called the achievement motivation. So either
Mm.
security motivation or achievement motivation. So now they frame in their mind, okay, this person is seeking, they talked about how important it is to be in a good school district. and they talked about how their kid needs a study room. Okay, now they know that their child's looking to be more successful. So now they can frame up their home around greater success. And then there's a whole bunch of words that we told them to start using during that conversation. The whole goal was to make the home buyer or prospective home buyer feel like this salesperson just gets me. They just know me. And how do they do that? It's because they're using the same types of words and framing up the home in such a way that it does feel natural. So totally different new sales process. And then the customer experience, we also helped them out with when you're building out you have to do all the fixtures. You have to go back in and do all the fixtures and
Oh yeah.
make all the decisions. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we actually did new scripting around that so that they were buying the right, they were making the right decisions and the right fixtures around their goals and again their motivation. So drastically different companies. So we actually took that same model and been implementing that same model across different divisions of their company.
That is super interesting to think of because you're taking me way back to when we bought this home, and we did get excited because it was a brand new neighborhood. It was a new development, and the excitement of what was going to be here was thrilling. But also we thought we'd do fine with the schools, but my son was we only had one at that time. He was very young, and so we had some time to figure that out. But all that was kind of fun. You know what I mean? And so they did do a good job with that, but it became fun. Like we can pick the cabinets and pick the things. And now I'm looking at my cabinets saying, what the hell did we pick that color for? But whatever.
Well,
It was
I'll
12,
give you
13 years ago.
Well, I'll give you a tip. So real estate agents will do this, and they don't know, maybe they don't know the psychological idea behind this, but a lot of times what they'll do is they'll show you a house and go, why don't you sit in on the couch? Or why don't you go to the back porch and
Mm,
just get a feel for it? What they really want you to do, they may not know this, is you're envisioning yourself in this home.
mm.
And what's happening is your brain is starting to go like, what are all the possibilities? And you're creating connections between your happiness because you're thinking about, nobody goes in a home rarely and goes like, my life's going to get worse. Like they're buying a home because they want their life to get better. So when they put you in that chair, realize what they're doing. They're telling, and they walk away. They don't want to be in that world. They want you alone in that world so you can create yourself and looking yourself and how you fit in this new world. That's all psychology. They don't know they're doing it, but these things influence us. So later on, when you're talking to your wife, you're going, "That home just felt like us, didn't it?" Well,
Yeah.
of course it did because you were sitting there imagining yourself
So
in that
in
home.
it. So the interesting thing was when we came down here, we were living in an apartment, right? So we had the first child, and we said, okay, we need to get a house. And we were in a beautiful old colonial apartment in Newton, Massachusetts. And I don't know when that thing was built, early 1900s, maybe even 1800s. And it had this beautiful coffered ceiling. And I have never been in an apartment anything like it. Like that thing was legit gorgeous ceiling. And I went in the model home and they had a lounge. You could get one of the models with the loft, which wasn't our thing with the family. Maybe if I was still single, I had the loft with the wet bar and everything. That would have been cool. But it had this beautiful coffered ceiling, and I'm like, this is like the apartment. And now that was way extra, and we never went with the coffered ceiling because it just didn't make sense to spend the extra money. But that's exactly what I was doing. I'm sitting there on the couch going, "This would be really, really cool." And everything else worked, and so here we are, and we're still here, whatever years later. But that's fascinating to think of in that regard.
Mhm.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit because you brought up customer experience and CX, and this is basically a customer driven show. And we've got to talk about this stuff because this is going to be super interesting. Taking all of that we've all just learned, because I think a lot of people are taking a lot of information in. Customer experience teams rely on feedback and survey scores and NPS and all that, and metrics, right? So, from this kind of behavioral science perspective, what is the limit of that data and what does it miss? Because we're all about the metrics all the time in whatever industry you're in, even customer health scores, customer success. What does all this mean for that?
Yeah. So what these metrics do, and they're good metrics, by the way. I don't mean to tell you they're bad, but what they tell you, and oftentimes when you're asking somebody something in a survey, almost always it's telling you what people want. That's the very first part of the goals part pyramid that we talked about so many times. What people want, those are great. Here's the problem: is that if you don't know why they want it, then what you'll find is that those metrics are less predictive of what they will do in the future. Not totally unpredictive. There is
Mm,
some predictive possibility, but remember, we make emotional decisions, not just rational decisions. What we tend to do is make emotional decisions and post rationalize those decisions. I feel like this house is a great house and it fits within my price point and it has those vaulted ceilings that I grew up on, et cetera. So just realize that when you get those metrics, they're important metrics to have. You're most likely getting what people say they want, but there is a very big gap between what people say they want and what people will do. We call it in research the say do gap. It's all out there. And so we got to be careful about what people say they do. You know this because some people say, they'll say, oh, yes, I'll absolutely will buy a Snickers bar for $4 because it has crunch in it. And we realize when you launch that Snickers bar that nobody buys a $4 chocolate bar. But wait, people said they were going to buy it. They probably kind of meant it because they were talking about they had Snickers in their mind. They were asked a question. They're being very, I could see this crunch part of the Snickers. It's great. But the emotional part, when you're in front of a candy aisle and you see other candy bars that are at $1.99 and you have one that's double the price at the same size, you're thinking to yourself, that doesn't feel like a good value. The feeling often takes precedence. So that's why you got to be careful about some of these metrics. Get those metrics, but always ask why. Get to the why, get to the emotion, and then you're better able to actually predict and change and influence behaviors, right? Because we just talked about how do we influence behaviors through the experience side of having the salesperson frame up, the Snickers bar in this way, or maybe marketing to frame up that Snickers bar in this way versus another. So you can influence as well through your marketing by using these emotional factors.
I love it. You have to get to the why because it's not just about, putting the NPS score out there as a metric and a bonus and you got to hit your numbers and you'll get your bonus and all that. That's not the point. And I think a lot of the stuff gets misused. It's telling you something. It's a barometer. It's a dashboard for you to understand the why and make yourself better because there's all sorts of issues with them. And again, I kind of make fun of all these metrics and you're right. They're all good metrics and they're useful, but it depends on how you're using them. And I just feel like it's often missed. So that's a really important distinction. And this discussion puts that in the proper framework, I think, truly does. Okay. So let's talk about how you put this into play because not everybody has the budget of PepsiCo. So they can come to you and you can tell us a little bit more about your company does. But let's just pretend we're talking to somebody who's runs a smaller company and doesn't have the budget of, we're not selling Fritos or, Ruffles or anything with the big, right? What's something they could do? What's a simple move that they can do to start building this mindset, this psychological empathy with their customers, kind of start thinking and doing things differently?
Yeah. So first thing I would tell you, I'll plug the book just because if you want to learn about mind states. At the end of every chapter, there's a series of questions that you ask yourself. Now, can you ask your customers? Sure, if you have the money to do market research. But what I find is that, especially if you've been in your brand or you've been with your business for a while, you have what's called intuition. You kind of know some of this stuff. Doesn't mean your intuition it can't be wrong. It can be. But so I'll give you an example. I worked with years ago, Principal Financial, large financial services institution.
Oh yeah,
right?
know them well.
Yeah, Principal. Yeah, okay. So I got a call, and it was from these researchers and marketers, and they just said, "Hey, can we meet with you?" Sure. So I'm thinking, "Hey, I'm at Principal Financial. This is a client, right?" They called me without knowing that I had a company. They called me as the author. What they did was they went to my book, and then at the very end of every chapter, there's just questions you ask. And what these questions ask you is like, okay, think about your customer, answer this question, and then it'll tell you, oh, based on these answers, your customer's in the cautious mind state, or they're using security as their motivation. So imagine there are these questions. They went through and they had a book club is the way I understood it. So basically 4 marketers, 1 researcher, 3 marketers got together and they heard about the book and they were doing these activities, and then they just wanted to bounce those ideas past me, the expert. Well, then when they finally told me what they did and they told me their answers, I sat there, Gary, and I go, "You sound right. Like that sounds right to me." There was no market research. They didn't hire me. I'm like, that feels right. It was about 85% right. I go, "Have you thought about this?" Maybe they didn't. So my point is that this stuff, behavioral science sounds very intimidating, and we use these big words like heuristics and motivations. I promise you, if you just take these 4 questions, the questions from the model, that it becomes very clear. Oh, okay, I get my customers are worried. So now I have to message that worry. Oh, my customers are they assign value to things that are that people are in a position of authority, right? They assign value. If somebody in a position of authority thinks that's a good idea, then it must be a good idea. So what do you do as a marketer? Okay, get somebody who has a position of authority to recommend your brand. It's literally that easy. So that there's some real simple things you can do just by getting to the book and looking at the back half of those books of those chapters, and it'll walk you through the model.
Hmm. Interesting. Um, I think that's on next on my list. But you're also doing something interesting in your business, aren't you? With AI. Why don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us what you're doing there.
Yep. So conversations, whenever you have a conversation with somebody, imagine that it's like poker. They're giving you tells into their subconscious. So the way people talk, they're constantly telling you what's going on subconsciously. So what normally had happened was that if I did a piece of research, I would have to do an interview and I have to look line by line, word by word, and circle phrases and go, okay, for me to identify the psychological mind state that they're under
Yeah.
when making a decision. You know who does a really good job at that, Gary? AI.
AI.
AI does a really good job at that. So what we did was we created a technology called Bevy, and it's our behavioral intelligence platform. What it does is two things. One is that I can upload review data, I can upload conversation data, I can just upload market research, I can put it into this intelligence system for your company. And what she does is she turns into a persona that has deep emotional understanding. So she's not thinking rationally, she's thinking emotionally. So imagine that you're sitting there and you're in a meeting and you want to talk to your customer rather than about a decision, right? You're talking about raising prices. Like, I'm not sure if we should do that or not. I wish we had some consumer feedback. Well, you could pick up your phone, talk to your customer, who's an AI representation of your customer, and she'll give you feedback on your ideas, your marketing, as well as any kind of issues that you have that you want to run past your customer. So it's just like having your customer, but she's not going to tell you what she thinks you want to hear. She's going to tell you how she makes decisions, the why behind them. And then there's some other things with AI that allows you to, as a business owner, if you now understand the psychological mind state, now I want to do advertising that taps into that mind state. So Bevy, our intelligence platform, will create advertising. She'll write copy for you. She'll write emails for you. She will ideate new ideas and new marketing campaigns for you, all based upon your customer subconscious.
Wow. How about show notes for podcasts and LinkedIn posts promoting your episodes?
Yeah, she may she may be able to help you there, Gary. She may be able to help you there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a challenge, and I try to. I'm trying to get away from the AI stuff there, but it's kind of I kind of ideate with the AI, and
That's what we should.
yeah, that's what I'm. It's like I have a format, and then I do it, and then that just I've been finding more and more it just doesn't come out as my voice, so I have to just kind of hand write the things in and say, no, this is what I want. And, it corrects my grammar and my silliness. But yeah, back and forth. So interesting because you want it to be yourself, but, and I'm just talking show notes and podcast stuff, but when you talk about real copy and real advertising, that's a different story. And
Well, yeah. Well,
y-
what's interesting is you can make content or context so that your marketing will sound with your voice, which is
mm,
really important as a brand or as you as
yeah,
a show host. But what this does on top of it is but also make sure that that copy resonates with the listener. So not only is it my voice, but it's the listener's voice. And what's the number one voice we all hear every day? It's our own voice.
mm,
We hear our voice every single day. So when you message to your customer's voice, you're more likely to get them interested. And that's what Bevy and most behavioral science techniques allow you to do.
we hear our voice, what, 38,000 times a day?
Yeah, all day.
There's
Yeah,
something like that.
all day long. You're right. That's right.
Yeah. And then, well, can if you add coaching a 9-year-old baseball team, does that go up by to 50,000?
I don't know. Yeah, but
There's a few more choices there, but we're having fun. I've been bringing that up on most shows. All right. We are out of time on the regular traditional segment. We have got to hit the segments. Let's hit the segments and does it hold water? All right, everybody. It is time for Does It Hold Water, my favorite segment. This is where I ask our guests to be our resident expert witness for the day. I read them a quote, a piece of thought leadership, and they decide whether or not the case holds water or not and why, more importantly. Well, the defense team today has the CMO of a global snack brand on the stand explaining why his top 3 brands have lost share for the 6th time this year. And the clear answer comes back from the CMO, I'm sorry. Well, it's inflation. Shoppers are trading down to cheaper competitors. That's what the data shows. Does the defense case hold water?
I'm going to say it probably does not hold water because that's the easy way out. When you think you're losing share and people say, oh my gosh, it's just too expensive, it's just too expensive, our normal reaction is to lower prices, right? However, people create value in the mind. And sometimes value is not around a lower price, it's about getting more for my money. So oftentimes, what you find out is that to gain share, if you're losing share, it's not about lowering your price. It's about how do we get more product to our customers' hands at a lower price per unit. So, in most cases, especially the emotional side of things, people don't want to spend less. They want to get more for their money. So, in this case, I do not think that holds value.
Yeah, so it's more it's a value proposition,
Mhm.
and so how could that tie into a brand and the way it's packaged or shelved or something, um, right? Because is it a two for one, a bigger pack, bigger boxes, something like that?
Exactly right. Especially with gas prices, right, Gary? Like
Ugh.
so with gas prices right now, people may say, "Well, you know what? I want to make fewer trips because gas prices are so expensive, maybe in California or whatever." So they want the 2 for 1 deal so that they can have a larger or longer time between store visits so they don't have to go and drive. So that's providing value by giving people more product at a slightly higher price. They feel more value because they're not going to the store more often.
Yeah, interesting, interesting one. Certainly, and that that's right. You feel like it when you get the kind of jumbo packs, but you got to be careful of what you're actually what the price per unit is. And
Price per unit,
I
right?
don't do the shopping as much as I used to. I do a lot more of the I call it the live shopping, the Whole Foods, like the actual chicken and produce, not the stuff in a box. But
Yep.
you sit there and you're trying to do math in your head, like, is this really cheaper? What is it per unit? And it gets a little confusing sometimes. So interesting one. Good. All right, let's hit chip shots. All right, everybody, it is time for chip shots. These are my more short form questions, a little bit more personal, but still professional in nature. We try to go 3 or 4 time permitting. Will we always hit the book question first? Give us a book that has significantly influenced you, personal, professional, you name it.
Predictably Irrational changed my life. It's a book by Dan Ariely that brought kind of more of these sciences into popularity. So it's over a decade old now. But when I read that book, I looked at my degree in economics and felt like I had wasted $100,000 worth of education, though the Army paid for it. So I'm not that upset about it. But Predictably Irrational is a great book to start with.
Predict as I feel like I'm predictably rational, maybe I should read it. Is there hope for people who are overly rational like me?
I think it's going to show you that you're not nearly as rational as you think you are. That's the idea. That's the premise of the book. We should get back on the show one day, and you tell me
I
after
should,
reading it how you feel about yourself.
I should ask my wife because we're always having this discussion. She's like, people don't think like you. So, all right. Awesome. Good one. All right. The leader question. This is going to be fascinating with you. If you could spend the day shadowing a real leader, current leader, or professional in any industry, who would it be and what would you hope to learn?
So this may surprise you, um, but I am fascinated by RFK Jr. right now.
Go for
Right?
it. Yeah. No, I think he's
So
fascinating.
so so I guess I guess I should know more. He's the head of the FDA, and when he was out on the campaign trail, and you kind of make fun of the guy. Like a lot of people made fun of the guy. He's the anti-vaxxer and he has that raspy voice and he kind of seems like he mumbles. And so he became kind of like a punching bag, I think. And I didn't really respect him very much because I didn't know much about him. But if you look at what he's doing, like say with the food pyramid and with with artificial colors, he's actually doing some amazing things for our food. So I work with a lot of CPG companies,
Hmm.
big CPG companies, and I'm telling you, they are making multi million dollar decisions
Mm.
on changing the way snacks are made, changing the way beverages are made, changing the way candy is made. I'm working with the biggest ones. Those conversations were not happening before this guy got into office. And now they're making our food better. And so I'm fascinated by this guy because I felt like maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, he was kind of a joke. And now I feel like this guy is really doing some amazing things for our society and nobody really knows about it. But I see it on the inside because I see the amount of investment
Mm.
that companies are putting into their products now because of what they think he's going to mandate in the future. It's amazing. Walmart's doing amazing stuff because of him. And so I just think that guy is really fascinating.
He certainly is for a number of reasons. Now, one, the politics always blind us to what's really going on. And I try to always say what's really going on, because if you've worked in any company, you know there's stuff going on behind the scenes that you're not privy to. So Now, I don't know much about this stuff, and I'm saying that some of this makes sense, maybe, but this is bad. It's always is. I don't really know, but I'm trying to be more healthy, right? Because I'm getting older, and the dad bod is catching up to me, and I got to get out there. But I've been trying to lose
Yep.
weight and focusing on just eating healthier whole foods and not eating the crap. So it is interesting. I hope that is true. I believe it's true. I don't really know. But he's also a Kennedy. So
Yeah.
around these parts, that's pretty fascinating. And he is the son of RFK. And also historically, I'm just reading a book on all the presidents, and I just actually passed JFK and hit Lyndon Johnson and just on Nixon, but right in that period where his father was running for office, which was a little crazy and very, it was awful in many ways because there's political violence going on, but it is a really fascinating story. You got the JFK to the LBJ to Nixon, who was actually Eisen. A lot of people, if you're not my age, don't realize he was the vice president under Eisenhower.
Yeah.
And then the whole Nixon thing had a whole bit. So it's all that is very fascinating. And now he's coming out and kind of going against the grain a little, shall we say.
Mhm.
So that is truly a fascinating one. Great one, Will. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Now this one's it's come off the bench. It's not in the starting rotation, but for you, I said, "Oh, I got to put this one in there for him." What is the one decision-making principle that guides you when the stakes are high?
Yeah. I'm looking over here on my right because I actually have a note. And what I wrote here is that what's emotional versus real. So remember, sometimes you're going to be in the moment. I've been in the moment where I'm looking at my business, something's going really wrong, and I start going down this spiral of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my family? What I'm going to tell you to do is take a breath and remember your emotions, though they help you make decisions, they also help you make bad decisions. So what I do is I write down what is real versus what's emotion. And I'll say, wait, what's real? I got hired by this company. What's real? They sent me an email saying they're a little disappointed in what I gave them. Okay. What's real? They still want to talk about this. When you think about those things and take the emotion out of it, you'll find that you're better able to make real good, like you said, rational decisions when you're not going down the spiral. Are they going to sue me or whatever those emotions are? So I literally have a note here and I look at it when I start feeling really anxious about whatever the situation is, whether it's my kid at school,
Mm,
whether it's anything in life, what's real versus what's emotional, and separate those things. And when you find those bullets of what's real, you'll find a lot of times that the problems are not nearly as big as you think they are because
yeah.
there's no proof that they're as big as they are.
Yeah, brilliant. That is a absolutely brilliant one. And that's what I try to do. I try to be rational, but the emotions do come in to play no matter what you're doing. Even I kid around with coaching, but the parent, it's not the kids, it's the parents
I've heard that. Yeah.
get rather emotional about things. Their kids playing time, did they make the all-star team? And it's you always think your kid is here. The kid might be here, and I try to be rational when I'm coaching and helping my sons with what they're doing. Because yeah, the stakes get high and people get fired up. And it does help. Look, we've talked about this at work too. When things are going a little south and you're in a client focused role and you have to talk about why the clients are upset or your client might be at risk, you have to point out the issues that are happening and why somebody did something wrong. And that team isn't going to be too fond of you when you keep pointing out that they're not doing their job well. And that raises the emotional level, right? And it kind of feeds off each other. So we've talked about that before. So interesting stuff. Great one. All right. And the final one for you. Is there a particular experience or failure early in your career that taught you a valuable lesson you still use today?
Hmm. You know, there's one that comes to mind. So one time I was doing a piece of research at an energy company. I was inside the company. I was a junior analyst, and and I got this research report. And when I got the research report, I looked at it and it made sense. And I built a story around it. I'm like, okay, this makes sense. It was a customer satisfaction study. So I was talking about, okay, these are the things that customers like and they're satisfied with. Then the night before I was going to present it, the person who did the research, the vendor, came to me and said, we really messed up and we transposed all the numbers. So basically, what happened was everything that he said was happening, the exact opposite was happening. And I realized and then I made a story around that. I go, oh, here, okay, that makes total sense. Okay. What was interesting, Gary, was that both data sets made sense to me. My brain found sense around and a story around the first results. And then when he came back, my brain made a story around the second set of results. And it was fine. Like nobody found out. We presented the new study the next day. It was fine. But in my head, I thought to myself how easy it was for me to take data that was not real, not true, create a story around it, and absolutely believe it. And how easy it was for me to change that belief because this guy came to me and said, "Hey, here's a whole new set of data." And I created a brand new story around our customer, which was absolutely the opposite of what I said the night before. And so that
Mm,
I reflect on that thinking we are machines that build story, something called narrative
yeah.
psychology. We don't talk about it in a book, but we build stories in our heads and just realize that your brain is designed to build story. And sometimes the data you give it will build a story that's not real. And so that's always kept with me thinking, are you designing a story that you think is you want, or are you really designing the story that's what the data is telling you?
Yeah, that's interesting because look, I'll say it again. I don't want to turn this into politics, but at political level, both sides of the equation, that happens in politics all the time, right? Because the data with surveys and polls,
Mhm.
I always tell people be careful with the polls because it's the same thing there. You could have the you should be telling a story, not telling the
The story,
story,
your
not
story.
telling a story, and that could be easily manipulated because it's actually very hard to do a poll because who's going to go out and vote, and you've got to know the exact demographics and it's actually really hard to get it accurate, so that could be played with a little. So I always think of it in that regard. And my background's in investments and investment management. You can't do that, right? You
Right.
cannot do that. You cannot cherry pick. You cannot. There is a method for calculating investment performance for a reason, and you have to compare it to a benchmark over quarters. You can The quarter has to start January 1st and then end of March. You can't decide, yeah, I'm going to measure my performance starting January 23rd, and
And
then
just
I'm going to measure it to like June the 5th. Okay. And then,
yeah.
hey, look how great I'm doing. It has to be exact. So that kind of thing actually drives me crazy because I have such a rigid view of the world and data, and has to be presented in such a way. So great analysis, great examples. Will, you have been a tremendously interesting and insightful guest. Thank you so much for being here. Why don't you tell the audience where we can find you?
Yep. You can always go to mindstategroup.com. You can learn about the company and the methodologies and things that we do. But I really do a lot of writing on LinkedIn. So look me up, Will Leach on LinkedIn. You'll see my big fat face up on the screen with my book. And that's where I do a lot of my writing. I
Hmm.
tend to get my thoughts out there on LinkedIn, and you can sign up for a newsletter there too if you want to. But if you want to learn more about behavioral science, that's where I do the majority of my work.
Yeah, I highly encourage you to do because I went out there. It is very insightful, very well written stuff. This is not just marketing get your attention stuff. This is it is marketing stuff. Well, you know what I mean. It's not it's not just the post to rage engagement. It is very thoughtful content. So highly recommended. So all right. That's all for today. If I got to wrap this up. So thank you all for joining us today. We'll be back with more customer experience leaders, customer success leaders, entrepreneurs. Like I say, I throw all sorts of different curveballs, a couple change up at you. This has been a great one. Thanks again, Will. That's all for today, folks. Bye for now. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you found something insightful that will enhance your experiences and drive your success. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and share your thoughts to help us improve the show. Don't forget to head on over to marracxhub.com for more ways to connect with me and learn more about experience management. Until next time, I'm Gary Marra, working hard for your customer and your success.